Having a successful fantasy basketball draft is not just about picking the right players for your team. It's also about staying away from the players that will end up breaking your heart and costing you your league championship. In this episode, we're going to go over a few players that you need to stay away from in your fantasy basketball drafts. This episode is presented to you by BetOnline. Football is back, and BetOnline is your number one information source for all sports wagering info with all the up-to-the-minute stats, news, scores, and matchup breakdowns. Get the latest game odds, spreads, and totals from the NFL and college football at your fingertips with BetOnline's real-time updates on statistics, news, and odds. From week 1 all the way to the college football playoff and Super Bowl, BetOnline gives you access to the best football, promotions, and contests available anywhere online. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Remember, use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Do not draft Victor Wembanyama in the first round of your fantasy basketball draft. Don't even draft him in the second round. For real. It's wild out here. Come on, man. I mean, in most leagues, in most mock drafts that I'm doing, I should say, I see people reaching for Victor. I've seen him go in the first round. He definitely goes at the second, and sometimes I see people take him at the third. For me, I know he's a generational talent. The most buzz we've seen about a prospect since LeBron James. So I totally get it. It makes sense. We're hyped. People were hyped about Zion, right? I would say this about Victor Wembanyama. Although I do have concerns, I believe his upside is out of this world. It's literally on another planet. He is 7'5", y'all. Some people believe he could actually lead the league in blocks this season because of his like freakish athletic ability and size. People think he can do that. I'm not one of those people. I do think he's great. I do think he'll have an impact on the league, maybe even the Spurs to some extent, but I don't believe he's going to be a top 20 fantasy basketball producer in any format. You know, that's category leagues, points leagues, roto leagues even. I don't think he's going to be that guy this season. And I'll tell you some of the reasons why. So, one of the things I would say that concern me is the fact that he's playing for the San Antonio Spurs. Greg Popovich, aka the godfather of load management. And this is his most prized possession. Tim Duncan was a catch. Kawhi Leonard was a catch. Manu Ginobili, great. Tony Parker, Victor's fellow French brother, top-notch Hall of Famer. None of those guys are as valuable to Greg Popovich as Victor Wembanyama is at this point of his career, right? So when Timmy came in as a rookie, he wasn't as valuable as Victor is for a lot of reasons. A, Victor is coming to rescue the franchise. Although San Antonio was still knocking at the door, they had David Robinson, who was an elite player. You know what I'm saying? He scored like 70 points in a game. Like, he's that guy. But with Victor, my biggest concern is him playing for Pop. What does that look like? Although Victor has the ability to contribute with rebounding, scoring, blocks, which is all great for fantasy, one thing you need in order to be successful or be a consistent fantasy basketball contributor is get on the floor. You got to be available. You got to be playing. You got to be, you got to get minutes. And I know he's going to get some, but as the season goes on and on, that might change. Back-to-backs. I don't think that Victor Wembanyama is going to be playing a whole bunch of back-to-backs, especially as we get later on in the season. Now, if for some miraculous twist of fate, the San Antonio Spurs turn into a playoff team that, gets the third seed, that could change. I don't think that's going to happen this season. I think there's a lot of room for growth for that squad. And I believe that Victor Wembanyama will sit some back-to-backs. It's just the Popovich way. I also believe that as we get later on in the season, the talk of a shutdown might start to surface. I'm just saying. And I know what you're probably thinking. Where they do that at? Why would you shut him down? Like, if that's bad for the NBA. They're not going to do that. No. We're talking about Greg Popovich, San Antonio Spurs. So someone might say, well, there's a new load management rule in place. The load management rule applies to like all-stars and first NBA, second NBA type players. Victor Wembanyama is not there, so they can rest him without any kind of penalty. Now, if he makes the All-Star game in February or whatever, I don't know if the rule applies to current year or previous years in that active season or not. But as of right now, they could rest the young man. And I think that for fantasy managers, that is not gonna work for us. So for those reasons, I am out on Victor Wembanyama this year. Now, there is a disclaimer. I am a value hunter. So if for some reason I'm late in the third, maybe even early in the fourth, let's say if he dropped to the fourth round, I would probably consider picking him up. So when I say don't draft these players, when I say a don't draft list, that's all fine and dandy for the internet. But when we think about value in a fantasy basketball draft, I never go into a draft unless someone is like injured, right? Like someone's out. I'm not drafting them. I'll likely stay away from them, especially if it's a season-ending injury, right? Someone like John Morant, for example, who's going to be out for a big amount of, a huge portion of the early season. Even for the right price, I would grab him. But for Victor, it's someone I would look at only if it was tons of value there. Do not draft him in the first round, y'all. Do not get hyped. Do not make that mistake. Don't be a San Antonio Spurs fan that makes that decision and in turn ruins their chances at bringing home a fantasy basketball championship this year. Don't do it to yourself. Second round, same thing. Stay away from him. Next player, I wanted to keep it, Greg Popovich. You know what I'm saying? Had to get it popping with Popovich. Let's talk about Kawhi Leonard. Mr. Sleeping on the bench himself. Mr. Chill, I can't do it tonight, coach. Mr. Load Management himself. So if Greg Popovich is the godfather of load management, Kawhi Leonard is the freaking poster boy of load management. He's that guy. And I always say this when I start poking at Kawhi Leonard. I think he is an amazing talent. He's an NBA champion. You can't take anything away from him on the floor. I'm sure he does great things in the community. This is not personal. This is fantasy talk. I don't really bang with Kawhi Leonard when it comes to fantasy basketball because I've been burned too many times. My fingertips are scorched. Every time I touch it, it burns my finger. I got no fingerprints left dealing with Kawhi Leonard. So that's why he is a no-fly zone, a fade. Do not draft this man. And for me with Kawhi, again, that whole value, if he keeps falling, he's the type of player I would just stay away from him on the strength because somebody else is going to grab him. Most of the leagues I'm in, people are not going to let him fall that far. I just stay away as a general rule of thumb. I just can't anymore. Every time I've done it, I've been burned. But I do have another reason besides my personal opinion, right? So that's my opinion. You could disagree with that, but you can't disagree with the numbers. And this is for all formats. This is for your category leagues, your points leagues, your roto leagues, your game pick leagues and sleeper, whatever. Your man is on a decline. He's not a spring chicken no more. Because he hasn't been playing, y'all out here thinking Kawhi Leonard is not aging. Just because he's not putting miles on his tires doesn't mean that he's not getting older. Kawhi Leonard is 32 years old, y'all. He ain't in his 20s no more. Like one could argue he has passed his prime. The data would suggest that he has. So let's talk about it. In 2019, 2020, this is data pulled, official data. Listen to this. Your man only played 57 games, y'all. That is a 5 and a 7. That is Jalen Rose and Michael Vick. The 5 and a 7. But guess how many points per game he averaged that year? 27.1. Baller. Like, I think the year before he did similar numbers, but like that's a baller year. Check this out. The following year, in 2020, 2021, he missed 52 games. That's Jalen Rose with Cleveland Kyrie Irving. 52. Guess how many points per game he averaged, though? And this is where it's going to blow your mind. He averaged 27.1 in 2019, 2020. In 2021, he averaged 24.8. Well, 24.8 is still great, Robin. I get it. Peep this. In 2021, 2022, take a guess. Take a wild guess how many games he played. In 2021, 2022, how many games did Kawhi Leonard play? Zip 0. Stingy with De Niro. Might buy you Chris, but that about it. 0. Absolutely none done. Not fun if you're a Clippers fan, right? In 2022, 2023, he went back to the Jalen Rose, Kyrie Irving, 52, right? 52 games played, but averaged 23.8. So he went from 27 a game to 24 a game to 23 a game. The numbers don't lie, people. His per game averages in fantasy are great. Like, he is a great fantasy contributor when he's on the floor. But the fact of the matter is, your man is not on the floor. He don't play. He misses a bunch of games. He sits a bunch of back-to-backs. He's just going to burn you. And I would say this, that people will see him drop in drafts and grab him. For me, I don't give a shit Sue puppy. Where he falls, I am staying so far away from Kawhi Leonard in drafts this year. I'm out. I've been burned too many times. And when you talk about the resting rule, the load management rule that came in, right? People are like, oh no, let's trust him. Come on, Kawhi's going to do it. He's going to play, guys. This is it. They changed the rules, so we'll have him in fantasy. Don't kid yourself, fam. He ain't playing. They're going to be like, just go ahead and send that that penalty, referral to our offices. We'll pay the fine. Just send it over. Send over the slip. We'll pay the fine to make sure Kawhi is fine. We'll pay the fine so he's fine. No problem. They don't care about that. I hope I'm wrong, y'all. Like, I really, in my heart of hearts, I want to be wrong because I want Kawhi Leonard to play in fantasy basketball. I want him to play in real life. But the numbers don't lie. History always proves itself. Stay away from this man. You're going to have your heart broken and you're going to lose your freaking championship. And the last point on Kawhi Leonard, just on a real basketball fan perspective, from a real fantasy basketball and real NBA fan perspective, him not playing gives the Clippers no opportunity to develop the chemistry necessary for them to reach their maximum potential. On paper, they are a championship level team. They got all the weapons. They have arguably the best coach in the NBA. One of the best coaches in the NBA, in the league, a player's coach. And I feel like Kawhi's, injuries and rest and load management is just killing the team's chances of developing that chemistry. So that is all I have to say about Kawhi Leonard. Moving right along, Anthony Davis. I am not drafting Anthony Davis this year. I might draft him in a mock draft. And boy, he would have to really fall. He would have to fall for me to to pick him up. For me to grab him in one of my drafts, he would probably have to fall somewhere in the third round. Top of the third, maybe way into the second. I'd consider it, but third round, if he fell to the third round, I would have to do it. I would have to take the top off. The boobies is out. Hair blowing in the wind. The top is off. Convertible. I would have to grab him in the third round. But second round, a little shaky, baby. Right? Now, when he was playing last year, he was one of the top guys in fantasy. His per game value is out of this world. I'm talking like insane amount of production. And it gets you hyped every time. But just like Kawhi, I always get burned with AD. Every time I end up with him, he's out. And I think last year he played a little more than he usually does. But even still, man, like I don't want to take the risk. I don't have the bandwidth, man. I just don't have the bandwidth to have Anthony Davis on my team. It's just too much. Like you watch the games. Let me know if you ever felt like this. You watching the Lakers play, oh man, LeBron is killing it. And then what? Anthony Davis falls on the floor. What happens in the arena? Right? The air is sucked out of the freaking arena. Everybody's like, oh my God. Is he okay? Oh my God, he's getting up slow. He's like, he's making faces, he's grimacing, he limps off to the side. Everybody's like, season over. Twitter lights up. Okay, Anthony Davis is down again, guys. It has now become like a cultural thing, like an NBA culture thing. Like Anthony Davis, the man made of glass. It's ridiculous, yo. And for fantasy, again, I don't have the bandwidth. I need to get somebody in my lineup that I know is going to play. For the most part, he's going to stay healthy, and I don't have to get super duper stressed every time he gets a nick, a bump, or a bruise. Like Anthony Davis gets a hangnail and we're like, oh my God, is it infected? Will he have to have surgery? Come on, man. Is that where we at? It can't be. It can't be. The next player I want to talk about, your man from the big face brand, Jimmy Butler. Now, Jimmy Butler, when I talk Jimmy Butler and I start talking fantasy basketball, I always give the disclaimer that he's one of my favorite players in real life. He is a dog, like a pit bull Rottweiler. Like he is a monster. Playoff Jimmy, all that. I'm a huge fan. Hard-nosed player, never cheats the game, gives 110%, gives the fans what they want, shows up and shows out when it matters the most. But during the regular season, just like Kawhi, he don't play. He be resting. He like, I got to rest my big toe. I got to do this. I got to do that. In 2019, 2020, 58 games. 2020, 2021, 52 games. 2021, 2022, 57 games. And then he picked it up a little bit last year. He played 64 games. And the biggest thing for me is not even like just the fantasy basketball stuff. It's also just like the energy, right? So I know that he is an entrepreneur. He has a coffee brand, Big Face brand. He's on a record saying he wants to get up to $100 per cup of coffee. And I'm like, $100? You want to sell coffee for $100 a pop? Like top tier coffee out here. And I'm like, it's the $100 cup of coffee for me. Like what? No, 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 no. That is you calling it the big face brand. You might want to call it the bold face brand. I cannot. So fantasy wise, I'm staying away from him because he's not available and I need consistency. But then also, how you trying to sell me $100 cup of coffee? I can't do that for fantasy. I can't do that for real life. I can't do that with somebody else's money. I can't do that. Now that you know who not to draft, what I want you to do is play the waivers, set your lineups, and check out the next episode, you freaking fantasy nerd. This episode was presented to you by Bet Online, where the game starts.